Let's rock. So you guys want to hear something absolutely insane? Well, in the last 40 months, my YouTube grew from 0 to 2.23 million subscribers. My Instagram grew from 7,000 to 2.5 million subscribers, followers. You get the idea. My LinkedIn went from 0 to 324,000 followers. My TikTok went from 0 to 856,000 followers. My Twitter/X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, went from 0 to 617,000. My Facebook, which we just started, went from 0 to 25,000. There we go. Going in big, Facebook. My podcast went from 3,000 downloads to 25 million downloads. And my email subscribers went from 0 to 700,000 for a grand total of 2 billion impressions over that time period and 7.8 million new subscribers. And for a grand total of 1 million copies sold of my book. For those of you who are like, well, what does that mean? And I'll get to that in a second. So in 40-ish months, all of that happened. And I show all of this as proof to start this, to show one thing, is that this actually works. And you can build a brand without babes, without stunts, or kittens. And I start this proof because lots of people talk about stuff that they haven't done and teach a lot of sucky fluff as a result. You can see the man there. He's saying the truth. This fluff sucks. And I refuse to do that. And so before we got the 2 billion impressions and the 7.8 million subscribers, it wasn't like this. Because 40 months ago, I started with 0 subscribers and a big, quote, fancy plan. And my fancy plan had 3 steps. Step 1, make as much good stuff as I could. Step 2, post it everywhere I could. And step 3, learn as much as I could. And after 40-ish months, $4 million in team, equipment, vendors, studios, and software, 1,000 hours of me on camera recording, and 35,000 pieces of content. Let me say that again. 35,000, as in count to 1,000, and then do that 35 times in a row. I learned a lot of what not to do. But I did learn 6 things that made money and grew my brand that you can use today. Now, what I'd like to do is, for the remainder of the presentation, save you the 3.5 years and $4 million so you can just get the lessons without the scars. So that little box is our box of 6 lessons. Cool? All right, let's rock. So here are the 6 changes that we observed over the last 40-ish months that actually worked. Number 1, going from edutainment to education. Number 2, for us to for you. Number 3, wide to narrow. Number 4, views to revenue. Number 5, shorts to longs. Number 6, assume more to assume nothing. Now, most of those, I promise you, I will explain. And if it looks like, I think I know what that means, believe me, there's a lot more underneath of it. So let's start with the first one, edutainment to education. So I see content in 3 buckets. On one extreme, you've got entertainment, which is the entire point of entertainment, just to define the term, is to get people to watch. The only point of the entertainment is to just get people to consume it. That's it. If it accomplishes that, it has succeeded. On the other side, you have education, where the point of education is to get someone to change what they do, right? If you try and teach someone how to answer a phone, and then in the same situation, the phone rings and they don't do something, and then after they watch you do something, they then change what they do when the phone rings the second time, they have learned. So the point is to change their behavior. If the video or the content does that, then you've succeeded at educating them. And lastly, you have edutainment, which has the point of both trying to teach and entertaining at the same time. And to be clear, it's less that you make entertaining content or that you make educational content. It's more that you make content and people are either entertained or educated as a result. And so you can make one thing that entertains some people, and then that same thing educates other people. And so I just want to make this very clear that you don't control the audience. You make something and then education or entertainment occurs. But for our purposes, I'll define the content category as the most common outcome of your content. And so if a lot of people are entertained, then you've made entertaining content for the purpose of this presentation, even if 1 or 2 people learn something. So for example, some creators might learn stuff from Mr. Beast's videos. Wow, I learned how to make videos. But the vast majority of people are entertained. They watch just to watch. On the other hand, Walla, who's one of the #1 educators on YouTube, you can even see the different look and feels, and don't worry, I'm going to get into that. He may entertain some enthusiasts around that subject. But mostly, he educates students. And until recently, I've been trying to figure this out. I've spent a lot of time really working through this. And so I actually have videos in all 3 buckets. I have entertainment videos where the point is to get people to watch. I have edutainment videos where we try and teach and entertain at the same time. And then we have education videos where we just want to change people's behavior. We just want to teach them something. And so the first change, #1, that we see over lots of the data, I'll support in a second, is that I'm going all in on education for 3 reasons. #1 is that when we looked at all of our data, all views are not created equal. I'll dive into that in a second. #2 is I like educational videos. And #3 is I like people who like educational videos too, and or people who educate themselves, people who want to learn. And so let me explain these. So all views are not created equal. So there's this theory, and this will be one that's gonna rattle some cages. There's a theory that media works like a funnel. In fact, the vast majority of marketing infographics and things like that, almost all are funnels. And the theory goes like this. You make entertaining content, and then the theory states that people who watch that content then will go to more educational content. Okay? Sounds simple enough. We've got something wide, we've got something narrow. Fantastic. But in our experience, in my experience, and based on our book sales, based on our email opt-ins, and based on the applications we receive at acquisition.com to become portfolio companies, it works much more like this, which is that entertainment people want more entertainment content. And education people want more, say it with me, education content. And so in other words, these people do not become these people, not at any appreciable rate that we would build a business around. And they certainly don't read the books, join the email list, or apply to become portfolio businesses. So if I want more of these people, then they deserve the stuff that they value. And so that's the first reason that I'm doubling down on education. All views are not created equal. #2, the next is that I simply like doing it. All right, so I do believe that you should try and do stuff that you like doing, and if it happens to also be in line with your goals, awesome. It's much tougher when the thing you like doing isn't aligned with your goals. But in this instance, when I got that first piece of data, I was like, thank God, because this is stuff I like making most. All right, and so when I talk to ideal customers, in my mind, they are business owners and business interested people. Because if you know me, and anybody who's close to me would probably attest to this, is that like, if you hang out with me for any amount of time, we will probably talk about business because it's what I love talking about. I eat it, I sleep it, I drink it, I work 7 days on it, and like I skip holidays for it because for me, it is the holiday. So this is what I like doing. And this is what the people that I like serving also like. And so they like it better too. And this is where it got confusing for me leading up to this and why this is so important, is that it got very confusing when you have so many people saying, man, I really like the entertaining content. And this is where it gets difficult. This is where you have to read between the lines of the comments rather than just reading the comments themselves, all right? Because the thing is for us, or at least for me, they weren't necessarily who I was trying to attract. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, hey, if I could serve the whole world, I will. But I know that I tend to do better serving people who want to educate themselves than people who just want to watch or consume just for the sake of it. And so that's why I'm doubling down on going from edutainment, some entertainment, to education. So that's #1. So let's talk about change #2 that we saw. Going from for us to for you. You're like, well, what does that mean? Let me explain. So recently, a mutual friend came to the headquarters, and he said, hey, I've been consuming your stuff for years, but recently I just haven't been watching as much. And he said it offhandedly. He wasn't like trying to smash my ego into bits, and he failed at that. But when he said it, I really took it to heart, right? It was very gut-wrenching. He said it just doesn't resonate as much. I was like, okay, got it. And it felt like a gut punch since he's literally the person I could help most. This is a business owner doing 10 million plus a year. And I was like, man, well, that sucks. And that's when I realized that reading the comments actually led me a little bit astray. And for you, it might be leading you astray. And I'll give you some data to support that. And so some people loved our different styles, but not the people that I ultimately wanted to help or am best suited to serve. And so we realized that we were serving the wrong who. And that had some very significant downstream impacts on what we made and how we made it. So what does making for them or for business owners content really mean? Let me break this down into tactics. All right, so tactically it meant 5 things. Number 1, different packaging. Number 2, different introductions. Number 3, different meat. Number 4, different visuals. And number 5, different what I'll call pre-work. All right, so let's start with number 1. So the difference between these 2 thumbnails is going from vague to clear. All right, so if I looked at all the stuff that we did in the past, if I said, what is the video on the left about? You'd probably be like, a rule of some sort that might have to do with money. Not sure. If I said, what's the video on the right, the yellow background video? If I were to describe it, I'd probably say a map or a blueprint or schematics of some sort that go from 0 to a million. Okay, well, guess what? The one on the right, it's exactly that. The one on the left actually has nothing to do with what that thumbnail looks like. And what do you know? When people click on something that they don't know what it's about, they have a smaller percentage of getting something they actually want than if you say, this is what this is about, and then they get exactly what they think it's about. So we're going from vague to clear in both what it looks like, the thumbnails, and what we say about it, the headlines. And so that's number 1, from a packaging perspective that we will be changing and or going more all in on. And I want to take a pause here for a second about this. There was also kind of a pervasive narrative in the kind of marketing world. It's like, you got to have curiosity. You got to you don't want to tell them everything. You want them to be able to get, no. If they want that thing, they will click on that thing, and then you just give them that thing. And that has been a very hard lesson for me to learn. And so I share it with you now. So the second is different introductions. You guys feeling this? Okay, good. Okay, different introductions. Now this one is really big. So going from confirming the thumbnail or confirming the headline to proof, and this is super important, I'll explain the difference. So a lot of the things that I learned, like many of you, if you are trying to get into content creation of any sort or media, is that you look at the people who are the biggest, right? And so oftentimes the biggest people in media are entertainers. Now, why is that? Because everyone gets value from entertainment, but there is no one thing from an education perspective that can provide value to everyone. Why? Because everyone already knows different stuff. So if I educate a wide slice of people, there's still already people who know that thing and then do not get value. So entertainment, by definition, will always be greater or larger, the followings for those people, than people who educate. There is no bones about it. It is that way. And so a lot of the lessons that entertainment teaches, everyone listens to because they have the biggest followings. But I don't think the actual tactics they subscribe or espouse are correct at a tactical level. At a principle level, yes. And so let me just say a second about what that principle is that the person who's going to consume the content, we want to increase their perceived likelihood that they will get what they clicked. So just like the headline and just like the thumbnails, now when they said in entertainment, you want to confirm it. Well, that's because most of the sensational entertainment is something crazy. And so the likelihood that someone just got the click so that they could not do that crazy thing is pretty high. And so if you want people to watch you smash a Lamborghini, then you better have the Lamborghini next to you or people aren't going to believe that you're actually going to smash it. Now, let's flip to entertainment for a second. Sorry, let's switch to education for a second. If I say I'm going to teach you a physics thing, I'm going to teach you about the law of, I don't even know what the first law of physics is, but if you push it, it will move, something like that. Anyways, if I want to have proof or increase the perceived likelihood that they're going to be well taught, then what I actually have to do is edify the person. Why should I listen to you? If I'm the viewer, there's a zillion people that could write something on a board. But if you're a PhD physicist, then the likelihood that I will listen to you and that I will get what I want is much higher. And so in both of these examples, we are actually doing the same thing, but we do it differently if you want to educate. And for me, when I looked at my videos, and I'll explain the data in a second, it became really clear. And so in entertainment, it's say the title again and then literally show them what was on the thumbnail. In education, it's show them that you can do what you promised them in the thumbnail. And that's the difference. And to figure out what made intros for our videos work, I actually rewatched my top 35 educational videos. This actually took some time, and so let me just save you like a lot of hours and just give you the nugget. And so I actually developed a new moniker around how to think about introductions for ourselves that I'm spreading throughout my whole team, and you can just steal it. Proof, promise, plan. So I'll break down all three of these. So all of the introductions of the best education videos that we had these three characteristics. And I want to make one point about the order of these, is that you can have these three mixed in any order you want. I would emphasize the one that is the most important for that particular piece of content. So if you have something that you're making that you think the proof is going to be really important, then lead with that. If you have a promise that's incredibly important for the audience, then lead with that. If you have a plan that for some reason is going to be more emphasized, then lead with that. But I would say that for our content, for the most, because I'm a business educator about making money in general, most people have this big glaring sign above their head before they can even turn on the volume of their brain, which is, why should I listen to you? And so I tend to lead with proof. And so proof is that you prove that you know what you're talking about. You give people a reason to believe you. The promise is to tell them what they're going to get or learn from the video. And the plan sets the expectations of what will happen next. So let me give you a real-world example of this. I started this presentation with data that shows that I've done what I'm talking about. If I went up here and just skipped this part, you might be like, okay, all of this up to this point, why should I listen to you? And you'd be right in thinking that, because you have no idea who I am. I could just be some random dude that looks like a Birkenstock, slightly lumberjacky-ish, weirdly dressed man. Like, why would you listen? And you'd be reasonable to believe that, right? But if you start with that, then you're like, okay, well, he knows something. The promise was what I said you would get at the beginning. I said I learned 6 things that made money and grew my brain that you can use today. And I'm going to save you $4 million in 3.5 years, and you'll just get all the lessons that I learned. That was the promise. Making sense? Okay. And then finally, we had the plan. I said, how are we going to get there? How am I going to complete that promise? I said, well, there's 6 changes, and I'm going to walk through them. That's the plan. And so leading with those things, we found got business owners, or the people that I'm interested in, to actually better frame and perceive and get educated on the content that we're talking about. And so that's what we're changing out of our introductions. Third, now let's talk about how this strategy changes the meat of the content. What we're actually like the real bones, the potatoes. All right? Is that going from be-real / vlog stuff, because we have made that, to list, steps, and stories. When we looked at the educational content that did the best, they had more of the right and less of the left. From razzle, I would love to say to dazzle, but it really is, it's just razzle on the left. And so I actually wanted to show a different type of content. So I don't want to make this seem like this is all YouTube-y. I just have like long form video there has all of the elements, and some platforms don't have all of them. So YouTube's a very easy platform to base this off of. But this is from Instagram, and TikTok would function the same way, etc. So if you look at the squares here, I just pulled the last 30 days of content that we made. And I looked at our bottom performing over the last 30 days that we posted that were reels. And then I looked at the top. Now, interestingly, it was almost a perfect reversal. So the bottom 12 videos that we made, 8 out of 12, I would say had more razzle emphasized. It was more about effects, a little bit higher production. And on the flip side, and this is what was crazy, and this is why I'm sharing this stuff with you, because like I would literally never have guessed it, and that's why we look. 9 out of 12, 75% of the best videos we had emphasized language, emphasized the actual message more than the production. And so it was about emphasizing the language rather than the razzle. I find this very fascinating. Now, to be really clear, you can have really bad language, or like poor, vague, unclear language, and it won't do well. And you might have razzle that just absolutely crushes. I just look at the trends of 75% on this side were this style or this type, and 75% that weren't as good were this style. Well then, let's do more of this and less of that. And so those are the main meat changers that we're doing in the videos. We're emphasizing language. This also is true with longs as well. So if I go and show you this real quick, language, that's on the screen, and that's one of our best videos ever. And that takes up 70, 80% of the video is actually just words. Interesting, for me at least. I mean, I was a little offended because I thought I had a good face, but apparently no one cares. So that's what we're changing about the meat. So let's talk about visuals. This one's a big one. All right, so going from overproduction, and I want to be clear, not overproduction for the objective. So it's not like my team did anything wrong or anything like that. It's just that if we want to educate, sometimes production distracts from the objective of education. If the point for entertainment is to get someone to watch, then adding lots of things can be a good thing. But if you're trying to learn physics and there's whiz-bangs and pop-ups and changing backgrounds, it's really hard to learn. And if that's the throughput, or that's the point of the video, then it actually detracts rather than adds. And so the difference that I put in this example here is we have a background that changes colors while I'm teaching something. It does not help someone understand the subject matter better, fundamentally. Changing background color will not help anyone learn more. On the flip side, clarifying what words on a screen are, because maybe my handwriting's not that good, would help people understand. That's the difference. So overproduction to effective production. From distracting to enhancing. From visual effects to visualizing data. So instead of having flames behind me, it's what does this look like on a chart? So we can give relative scale, so we can have scope, so we can show changes over time. And so that's how the visuals that did the best looked like. And then number 5, let's talk about pre-work for a second. So going from post-production to pre-search. So instead of saying, hey, let's just record something and then fix it in post, anybody who's in the media side knows what I'm talking about, 4 weeks of editing after almost no prep to get a video out. Well, what if we did 4 weeks of research and then we have almost no editing because we thought of everything ahead of time? Well, guess what? The videos where we spent, the hour-to-hour ratio is stupid, and I'll get to that in a second. But if we spend a quarter of the time that we used to spend on post in pre, we eliminate 90%, maybe 95% of our post-edit work and man hours. And for the business owners in the room, that's real cost. That's real savings. And for the also business owners in the room, that also means increased production. So if I can take the quarter of the time and I can get almost 0 time on the back end, that's 4 times the videos. But not only is it 4 times the output, it's also higher quality for your goal and your audience. So this is a big thing that we noticed. The videos that we spent the most time on the front end, we spent less time on the back, and they did better. And so we want to spend more time before than after. And so this is my little quote, if you want to write something down. An ounce of pre-work is worth a pound of post. So that was my little take on this. And so by focusing more on what educates and what it means, we do great. And everything else distracts from that goal. And so those are the 5 things that we're changing tactically and that we're doubling down on to cater to business owners. This, at least for my audience, is what they cared about. And I happen to be in that audience, and I feel that way too, so I'm happy about it. So that's how we went from for us as media people to a degree, because I've gotten into this now, to for you or for your audience. And for me, that means for business owners. So now let's talk about why dinero. All right, and this will also ruffle some feathers and rattle some cages. So instead of talking about relationships and college and food and lifestyle, I'm going to be narrowing down or doubling down on, if you will, business models, business leverage, and selling in a business. Notice business being in all of these videos and all these topics. And so that's how I'm going narrower. Very simple. Now, I'm going to go back a slide because I want to hit on this for a second. Just like I said earlier that people who like entertainment also just want more entertainment, what we also found is that people who, I'll go back real quick, people who watch relationship stuff want more relationship stuff. And as they should, that's what they clicked on. That's what they want. That makes sense. And people who want to learn about college are people trying to make a decision about college. Guess what those people probably aren't? Business owners. And people who want to learn about food, they watch other food videos. And people who want to learn about lifestyle probably watch other lifestyle videos. But for me, those were not necessarily the people that vibed the most with my stuff. And that makes sense because, to be fair, this is a little bit more foreign to me. When I talk about business, I feel very comfortable. When I talk about these things, I just give what I would consider hot takes. This is my perspective. So that is what we're doubling down on in terms of the topics that we're choosing for the content we make. So that's number 3. Let's go to number 4 in terms of the things we're doubling down on. So before this, we used to track views. This is another big one. Man, all 6 of these are big. Man, I'm glad I made a presentation about it. So before this, we used to track views as our primary metric. So I'll take a second here. Who uses, be honest. Everybody's like, likes don't, you can't trade likes for paying rent. You can't pay payroll with views. Sure, okay, got it. Who here actually tracks something besides views? Let me say it again. Who makes views the most important metric you track? All right, right, a lot of you. That's okay, me too. But I'm going to give you a good metric that you can track. And this was after pouring through, believe me, I'm a big data guy. A metric that you might not expect. So the main reason is that I had a 6 to 12 month deal cycle. So I started by using views because I really had no other metric. Because for those of you who don't know what I do, well, I'll explain in a second. But we had no idea what it would do besides driving awareness, and I didn't really have any other objective, right? But in that time period of doing a deal in every 6 to 12 months, because we buy companies, that's more or less what we do, we began seeing a much closer correlation with faster feedback metrics. And ideally, in any business, you want as little latency between the metrics you track and the behavior you want to change. And so if you want to get people to change something and you want to look at something that takes a year to get feedback, really tough to change behavior. But if you can have a metric that you can see daily changes or hourly changes, then those are things that are going to much more quickly change behavior so that you can have 100 feedback loops in terms of changing and getting better than 1 every year. And so besides book sales, opt-ins, and applications, there was a metric that stood out as fastest and most measurable. It was ad revenue. And this is really surprising to me. So, and this is the point I want to make real quick, is that to be clear, for those of you who don't know who I am, ad revenue is not how I make my money. All right, just very clearly. For those of you who don't know, my wife and I exited our first big company for $46.2 million in December of 2021. You can Google it. American Pacific Group was the private equity firm. Jim Lunch and Prestige Labs were 2 of those companies. And since then, we invested and bought a number of companies that have grown a lot and do over $200 million a year. So I do media to feed a lot of different things, but I don't directly monetize the media. And ad revenue is, I'll explain why in a second, is an important metric that we can use for everything else, okay? So these are companies that we own, great. So for me, I pretty much always ignored ad revenue and just saw it as something that could offset some of the cost of my media team. There was really nothing else. But I was wrong, it's actually so much more. So let's dive into a little bit for a second of like, how does ad revenue come to be? So it comes from 2 things, this number of views times revenue per views. Now the actual term is RPMs, which is revenue per mille, which is French for 1,000, but it's number of views times the revenue that you get. Okay, per view, fantastic. So it takes into account, and this is why this is important, because we thought views, and that was the only metric we had, but we had to have something to counter it, because otherwise then you get views for view's sake. But we needed a quality metric with a quantity metric, which by the way, paired metrics, if you're ever tracking something for a department, having like number of tickets resolved with rating against the resolution of how well those customer service reps resolve, paired metrics allow you to get to the best or most effective throughput for any department. And I just didn't know enough about media to find out what our paired metric was. And this happens to be a single metric that pairs both. And so it takes account the quality of the audience, which for me was business owners who have amongst the highest spending power. And so RPMs are the highest. Now, so for me, the RPMs go up, it means I'm getting more of the quality people that I want. And so this gave me and my team something that we could shoot for that balanced making videos for the right people who wanted to watch. So I mean, ideally, we absolutely want to crank views with the right people. And that's what that was able to track for us. And looking backwards, the month with the highest RPMs and ad revenue also created the most book sales, the most opt-ins, and the most business applications. And this had nothing to do with how many views we got. In fact, we did kind of an experiment lately where we did 90 days of almost no business stuff. We just did more edutainment and entertainment style content, and our views went through the roof, like way up, 2-3x what we're accustomed to. But even with the increase in views, our ad revenue dropped by half. So we're actually getting the wrong people. And I share this with you so you don't have to. And so The nice thing about this from a team perspective, for those of you who do have larger teams and want to translate this over, is that my team now has real-time access to this. So they can see every single piece of content and the ad revenue that it generates. And they can quickly generate baselines in their mind of what's good and what's bad on an objective metric that really is good and bad, rather than just like, hey, this video cranked. Yeah, but it didn't bring any of the right people. We got this thing that had 10 million views, okay, but it drove nothing. Versus we had this video that had, 100,000 views, and it made more ad revenue than the one that had 10 million. And we saw the corresponding increase in the metrics that matter to us. And so that's why we switched from views being the metric that we're optimizing for to ad revenue, because it's a leading performance indicator. It happens almost in real time rather than something that happens in arrears, to give a fancy word, later. So that's number 4 in terms of the things that we're doubling down on. So let's talk about the 5th one, shorts to longs. All right, this is yet again another big one that's going to ruffle some feathers. So for a long time, the prevailing idea in content marketing was, again, a funnel. It's like everything's a funnel, all right? And it was believed that shorts viewers got more people to then watch longs, and then those long viewers would then translate into becoming customers, right? So people watch shorts, and then they watch longs, and they give you money, right? That was kind of the prevailing thought. But again, when we looked at the data, it looked more like this. Shorts viewers watch more shorts, and long viewers watch more longs, and customers buy more. And so the point is that these are different audiences. And I will make a note here that this can change by platform. So I might be a long viewer on one platform and a shorts viewer on another. And where I do think the magic happens is where you can have shorts in one thing, and so someone finds you on TikTok, but then they are a longs viewer on YouTube, and then they watch your longs there. So I do think there's an element there, but not the way the narrative goes. And so for us, longs drive a lot more conversions than shorts. Conversions being book sales, opt-ins, applications, all right? And business-related content, unsurprisingly, brings more business owners than not business-related content. And so we are going to double down on more longs about that stuff and change our short strategy to keep the volume the same, but focus more on business overall. And again, people watch differently on different platforms. So making shorts in order for people to, on a different platform, watch long still carries as far as we know. So despite the mega obsession with shorts that has kind of prevailed for the last few years because it was a new format of content, we're putting now more emphasis on longs overall. For now, as far as we have data. So that's number 5. Now let's talk about the 6th one that I'm going all in on. Assume more to assume nothing. All right, so what does this mean? So let's start with assume more and what that really means broken down. So assume more means I made content assuming people already knew me. Okay? So here's an example. The Alex Hormozi Guide to Haters. I might be like, if I don't know who Alex Hormozi is, or have never seen that face before, why do I care? If I see the day in the life of Alex Hormozi, yet again, I assume everyone knows me in this. I'm sharing these mistakes with you, as far as I'm concerned, for getting new people into my world. It wasn't made, I assumed, like everybody's gonna know me. The Alex Hormozi diet, everyone knows me. No, they're like, who is this guy? Right, and here's why this matters. If you want your content to bring people who don't know you, which is why many of you guys make content, then you can't assume they do. And so this is what this looks like tactically. From a headlines perspective, if I were to remake these today, I might try a first crack at business influencer crushes haters and shows how you can too. Okay, so now if I'm clicking, I would understand at least that this guy is a business influencer of some sort and he crushes haters. Okay, well, I might want to see haters get crushed. Day in the life of $200 million per year CEO. Okay, now the jet tells me that this Alex Hormozi from the first one before, Alex Hormozi may be rich or maybe he can afford a private jet, but now I know he's a CEO because I could be a rapper. I could be, more realistically, when I walk around the place that I live, all the people that in my community assume that I'm a football player. It's the number one thing. They're like, so you play football? Are you on the hockey team? And I say, no, nope, nothing wrong with that, but no, that's not what I do. And then the third one there, Alex Hormozi diet, 16-hour workday, 6-pack diet for business owners, whatever. The point is that we actually make it welcoming to everyone. And so here's how we do this tactically within the content itself. So we go from they know me to introducing yourself every time. So earlier I was like, I'm Alex Hormozi, this is what I do, this is the subscribers I've gotten, whatever. We introduce ourselves. 2, they know why they should listen to me. Tell people why they should listen to you every time. 3, the inside jokes. You know how I get. No, I don't know how you get. Please fully explain the reference, because that references another piece of content that I haven't seen, because this is the first video I've seen from you. And if you tell an inside joke and someone doesn't understand the inside joke, guess where they are? On the outside. And guess where people don't want to be? On the outside. And guess where people spend money? On the inside. And number 4, going from acting like you're already friends to pretending everything goes to people who have no idea who you are. And when you make content so people who don't know you can enjoy it, more do. And for those of you who are worried, because I can already hear the thoughts that are coming up, so let me just address those right now. I see you. I'm going to lose retention if I introduce myself. Okay, well, let's play the equal opposite. Would you rather fewer people know who you are or more people who have no clue? Because on one hand, we have some people who know you, and on the other hand, we have lots of people who also don't know you. So you're in the exact same position you were before. 2, well, aren't people going to get sick of this? You're going to keep saying your name every time or keep introducing yourself? Well, from what I can tell, warm people like the reminders, and cold people need the introduction. And as a total side note, this is a fun little experiment for everyone here. You can run this when you leave here. Who here actually has posted content in the last year? Okay, good, okay. Good. For a second, I was like, this would have been really bad if no one had raised their hand. Fantastic. Okay. I want you to look at last year, and I want you to look at your number 1 piece of content. And this is what I want you to do. Just post it again. And then let me know how it does. And I will bet you that it does just as well or better than the stuff that you're posting right now. And let me tell you one reason why I believe that to be true. Because if you have been posting consistently, guess what's also happened? More people have entered your audience. And guess what they haven't seen? That amazing piece of content that everyone from last year said was the number 1 best thing you ever made. And you know what you said? New people, you don't get that. That was only for my old folks. My OGs, they only get that. No, you got to reintroduce some of the stuff, your greatest hits. You got to bring that stuff in so that the new people also know what your greatest hits are, so that the lore continues to compound and grow. So, number 3, and this one, or subpoint, and this is one for me personally. I follow a bunch of quote accounts. I like comedy and philosophy and like fighting. There's like kind of categories that I follow, and gym equipment. And so I get quotes a lot on my newsfeed. But you know what happens when I see a quote from Sophocles or Epictetus yet again that reminds me that I should just toughen up and keep going? I like the reminder. I'm not like, Epictetus, God, you lived 4,000 years ago. Like, get over yourself. No, he's not making new content, but guess what? People still post it and people still read it because we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. At least I do. To give a little tactical one on this from mainstream, because this might resonate for some of the older people in the crowd, there was this thing called television a while back, used to be big. Anyways, instead of having it on your phone, it was like this big screen on a wall. It was a whole thing. Anyways, I won't get into it. It's like floppy disk. Regardless, floppy disk was, okay, anyways. So there used to be this thing where at the beginning of every show, there was a theme song, right? So they'd be like, cheers, where everybody knows your names. And there's always a little introduction. It says produced by and all that stuff. And if those shows that spend gazillions of dollars on testing chose to think that despite selling more advertising space, it was worth having the same exact theme song and introduction for the show, don't you think it might be worth that for us too? And here's an interesting thing, the last thing, positive associations and sticks. If you actually get sing-songy about how you introduce yourself or the things that you relate to you, it starts to become something that people expect, and then they start associating it with all the positive other experiences they had with you. So if I always introduce something a certain way and then I deliver value afterwards, they associate the introduction with the value. And guess who else do they associate that with? You. And so, for those of you who are concerned, you can add variety to this. And I want to show you a cool little real-world example of this. So The Simpsons has the longest standing show, to my knowledge, that has existed on television. And the introduction is the same. Now, Bart would be like 70 by now, or whatever his actual age would be if it was actual humans. But it isn't, right? And every introduction has Bart at some point in detention writing something on the board. For those of you who don't know The Simpsons, every one of the introductions actually changes. Every one of them. And so they still have the introduction that has all the positive associations with the funny times and the humor and the laughs that you've had with the show, but they introduce a tiny bit of variety into them to keep it interesting. And then what happens is people look forward to these introductions because they want to find the Easter egg. The real fans now get catered to, and the new fans don't know about it yet, but they will. And so now you actually serve both sides of the audience, the people who know you and the people who are just coming cold. And so that's it. Small variation, same introduction, you let the new people in, and you give something to the people who already know you. So, title it like they don't know you, introduce yourself, say why they should listen, prioritize the content that makes sense for strangers, deprioritizing the vlogs, the hot takes, the opinions, because if you can serve both audiences, serve both. Let the new people in, rather than have a wall they have to jump over. Let them in on the joke. Fully explain the references that you make. Make all jokes inside jokes for everyone. And then finally, mentally act as though you're always talking to a stranger, because if the content does well, you are. At least that's what I'm going to be doing. And so that's the 6 big change that we're doubling down on. And so now that we covered those changes in my strategy, I just want to get real for a second. Everything has a cost. And it's not that other types of media or other topics or other formats don't work. Obviously, we had a smorgasbord. We had a huge variety, a cornucopia, myriad content types that we did over the last 40-ish months. And obviously, we had 7.8 million subscribers and 2 billion views during that time period in a niche audience of business owners, which is pretty good. And so it's not to say that other things don't work. I'd even say that my mess-ups also work to a small degree. It's just that they didn't work as well as something else might have. And so the game, at least as I see it in entrepreneurship, is figuring out what's my biggest bang for buck, right? What's the content that gets me the most of everything? Because you only have limited resources. You have time, money, energy, and you put it into your team, and that goes onto social media or the media that you market on, and then that has output. And so if you can become more efficient with the inputs you get more output on the other side. And so the question becomes, with the resources I have, how can I maximize the number of the right people who find out about my stuff? And so this is something that I live by. Anything works better than nothing. So raise your hand right now if you haven't made a piece of content in 90 days. Okay, just do something. Because if you do something, you will do better than what you're currently doing. 2, some things work better than others. And 3, nothing works forever. And so the requirement of the entrepreneur is to start doing something, see what works better, and then do as much of that as they possibly can for as long as they can until it slows down, and then figure out what the next thing to do is. And then do as much as they can at that. So is that helpful in terms of understanding content and media? Yes. Awesome. Do you feel like you got at least one lesson without the scar, or saved at least a tiny percentage of the $4 million that I spent learning what didn't work so I could show you these 6 things that do? Okay, good. Would you like more stuff like this? Okay. Well, then I've got a bunch of free stuff that I can give you to help you grow your brand and make some money. That be all right? Okay. So if you're just starting a business right now, raise your hand. Okay, this is for you. I'm the co-founder of the School Games. Inside, you'll find courses, full-day trainings, the easiest business model they know of to use this media stuff. Because it's one thing to just say like, oh, great, I just watched this whole thing on media. Now what do I do? Well, this gives you somewhere to actually practice it, like a sandbox. You can learn it, and you learn by doing. And this is one of the lowest stakes way to make money, get your first dollar across the finish line. And so fun fact, something I'm very proud of, is that right now 30.44% of people who finish their first month make their first dollar online by starting an online community. I think that's pretty cool. And so you can start that for free by going to school.com/games. All right. Tell them I sent you. So that's for everybody. Raise your hand if you're starting a business right now. Okay. That's for you. Now, if you're a little further along in your business journey, I've got free stuff for you too, all right? Trying to feel like Santa Claus today. I wrote these 2 books right now, which have 25,000 5-star reviews, and they sold 1 million+ copies. And I made courses for each of those books that are free, on my site. You can go to acquisition.com/training. So if you like this stuff, you want to learn more about offers, you want to learn more about advertising, more about getting leads, paid ads, content, all of that stuff, so that you can start making money within your business or scale it from wherever you are to wherever you want to go, I've made this stuff for you. These are real courses. It's not barred anywhere. You can click there, watch them all. All right? See, I put that for myself because this is how I roll. I get in the zone. So otherwise, you guys are all amazing. You can go there for stuff that will help you practice this stuff, actually do it in the real world. Because if you just walk away from here today and you do not execute anything, you learned nothing. And so for the love of God, just do one of the things so that you can get a tiny percent of that $4 million and the 35,000 pieces of content and the 1,000 hours that I spent recording. Just do one of them so that you can take that lesson for you. Thank you, guys.